Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors, and we have a quick video welcome from the South Okanagan Real Estate Board.
Good evening and welcome to the Penticton Herald's All Candidates Forum for the 2020 provincial election. My name is Lindy Cruikshank and I am the president of the South Okanagan Real Estate Board, and we are again pleased to co-sponsor tonight's event along with the Penticton Herald and the Penticton Lakeside Resort. For the safety of the public and in accordance with the government recommendations, tonight's event has been made possible by moving our audience to a virtual platform. Rest assured, all social distancing safety measures are being taken here as well. The audience was limited in size and candidates are well spaced apart inside the large ballroom at the Lakeside Resort. Candidates have been asked not to shake hands or interact with each other. Each lectern and microphone will be reserved solely for each candidate. Our candidates tonight are, in alphabetical order, Dan Ashton of the BC Liberal Party, Toni Boot for the NDP, Keith MacIntyre with the Libertarian Party, and Ted Shumaker of the Green Party. The ground rules will be explained as the evening progresses. All four candidates have approved the format. If you would like to read the ground rules, they are available online at pentictonherald.ca. Again, on behalf of the South Okanagan Real Estate Board and our professional real estate members, welcome and thank you for watching. Please do your democratic duty and vote, whether it's by mail or at one of the advance polls or in person on Election Day, Saturday, October 24th. Above all, please stay safe.
Thank you, Lindy. And again, I appreciate the financial sponsorship of the Real Estate Board. Later on, they have provided one question. Other than that, all questions are exclusively among our media panel. I'm not sure what's going to be asked, and none of the candidates have been told what the topics will be, and they also haven't been told the questions in advance. So it's certainly going to be a very entertaining evening. Thank you for the people at home for watching. Ordinarily, I would give a quick note to the audience about protocol and being good sports and not booing, but we have no audience, so we will skip that. And I would also like to acknowledge the sponsorship of the Penticton Lakeside Resort for donating this beautiful facility, and our third sponsor, Raid Black Fly Killer. They kill black flies dead. So should any of the candidates require a black fly killer or whatever, please see me. It seemed to be a problem in the vice presidential debate last week. So we have drawn randomly for numbers, and two people got the joke. I worked on that all day. And I do invite the other candidates to sit while the candidates are speaking. They are allowed 3 minutes, and we'll get a warning bell. By random draw, we'll begin with Ted Shumaker from the Green Party.
Thank you very much, James. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I acknowledge my home is on the traditional lands of the Syilx-speaking people. Thank you. So, who is Ted Shumaker? I'm just a regular guy. I've never taken a political science course in my life. I married Katie 25 years ago tomorrow. Happy anniversary, dear. I love you. I have 4 adult girls, 3 grandchildren. I'm a hiker, an archer, a kayaker. I was a hospital pharmacist for 20 years. I owned 2 drugstores over 10 years. I've worked in forestry. I've been a welder on Mica Dam, a member of the RCMP. This shows I have a lifetime of diverse experience that I can draw on once I become your MLA. My lack of experience in politics is my strength. I can listen, I can learn, and the only people I let tell me what I'm going to do are my voters. It has been statistically proven in Gladwell's books, The Blink and Tipping Point, that a large group of diverse people make better long-term decisions than one expert. We now have an NDP wishing to be that one expert, making all the decisions, when in fact, a minority government makes better decisions. Why? Because they are forced to cooperate. Examples, Medicare, CPP, 40-hour work week, all minority governments. And especially that BC is maybe even in the world one of the best COVID response, partly in due because we have a minority government that everybody listens to, and of course our hero Bonnie Henry and the people of BC that listen to her. I believe in democracy. There's a process to call an election. Just because the process is lawful does not make it right. This snap election is not right. It's dirty pool, and it goes against the spirit of democracy. This is why I stepped forward. The NDP claim that the Green blocked them from doing things. This is just not true. There was remarkable cooperation. Ask Dan Ashton. Can you trust an NDP who tears up a written agreement with the Greens, who puts all election workers' health at risk for COVID, who changes the rules of an election when it suits them? I'm asking you to send the NDP backroom boys a message. This time, they might have made a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Congratulations on your 25th wedding anniversary, and I'm sure the evening before your anniversary, there's no place you'd rather be than spending it with James Miller, so thank you. Our next speaker by random draw is from the Libertarian Party, Mr. Keith MacIntyre.
Hi, I'm Keith MacIntyre, and I'm running for the Libertarian Party. We are not the Liberals. I can't even count how many times people have asked me, are you running for the Liberals? No, we are not the Liberals or anything like any of the other major parties. We are the BC Libertarian Party. We don't have the controls and the restrictions that the big parties have. We can actually speak freely and ask questions in the legislature that actually matter to Penticton. We are the original ones that said end the ICBC. It's been on our platform for as long as you go ahead, look it up. It's there. I'm extremely frustrated with the major parties in the state of Canadian politics. I've been disillusioned for a long time. And this election is no different. What we have right now is a bunch of used car salesmen. Give me your vote. I'm going to give you $1,000 cash back. I'm going to give you no PST for a year, 200 free cops. Like, when is enough enough? Why is this the state of our politics? And if we keep rewarding our politicians by giving them votes for promises they make during the election, where were the votes, where were the promises, apologies, where were the promises in June and July when we all needed some hope? Who am I? I've lived in Penticton for 10 years. I've led the Smart Cities Challenge, which gave me a vast amount of conversations in Penticton and the Okanagan, and I understand what the problems are here. More importantly, I understand what the solutions are, and the solutions aren't the government taking care of the problems for us. The solutions are us as human beings using our intelligence to do what we know is right, not what people in Victoria tell us to do. I ran for school trustee 5 years ago because I saw that we needed somebody with business experience on the school board. Fast forward 5 years, I think I was right. We all know what happened with ST67 this year. I'm also the president of the Okanagan School of the Arts. Every time I drive by the Shatford Centre, my heart is broken with the doors closed to that. The bureaucratic, authoritarian approach that ST67 had closed the doors of that Shatford Centre. I have extensive pandemic training. I used to write software for the Centre for Disease Control that they use for training and simulations and understanding. I have a deep understanding of interventions. What we are doing in BC right now is not right. The regional restrictions are too much. I've had multiple conversations with seniors and care home professionals. I've talked to seniors who have lived long and fruitful lives contemplating suicide because they'd rather die than live the way we're treating them in the prisons that they're in. Does this feel right?
Thank you, Keith. Speaking third by random draw is BC Liberal candidate Dan Ashton.
Thank you, James. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Penticton Herald. Lindy from the Real Estate Board, as always, David Preste for his incredible support, Groovy Productions, Global's here tonight, Western's here tonight, and Castanet. So thank each of you for putting this on. I too would also like to thank the original people of the Okanagan for allowing us to share these incredible lands that we all call home. So Dan Ashton, who is he? Well, Dan Ashton arrived in Penticton when he was 2 weeks old from Alberta in 1955, moved to Trout Creek in 1963 with his family, attended Trout Creek School, Graduated from Trout Creek School Elementary, moved on to Summerland Secondary School, graduated, took a bit of time out for work, ended up taking some formal education in Washington State, came back into our family's business, which stretched from Vancouver to the West Kootenays, I apologize, ladies ready-to-wear retail. I have two wonderful children, Colton and Chantel. Colton has just graduated from the University of Victoria with a degree in biology, and my daughter Chantel is in Whitehorse, going to university up there taking criminal justice. I've had the incredible honor of representing the people from Naramata, Penticton, Summerland, and Summerland, Peachland, and the areas in between in the regional district. It's been an honor to serve the people, and I've done it through collaboration and cooperation, not only here in the city with my past track record at council, being a mayor, also working at the regional district on the board, and also as the chair of the board there. And that's how you get things done. And I've been very successful this last term in Victoria, where there has been a change of government. And a change of government can be good. A change of government is a reality check for everybody. But what you do is you work together. And one of my peers over here stated about the fact that's transpiring in Victoria these days. Well, I've never seen the legislature in my term and 3/4 down there work as well as I did this past term. So the summer session was everybody working together and pulling for what was important, the people and the citizens of British Columbia. And what I would ask is, if you consider there's 3 other good candidates up here that are vying for the position of MLA. What I'm asking is take a good look at each and every one of us, what we represent and what we've done in the past for the communities that we do want to represent here. Think about it long and hard, because it's incredibly important. And I do say that as an individual in the legislature, you have the opportunity to get your voice across on a continual basis, and you have that opportunity in your party. And that's one of the most wonderful things that I've experienced in British Columbia, is the opportunity of the democratic process. So ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this evening. I know there's going to be some great questions that have been composed by the news media, and hopefully also from those outside. Please listen to those answers and make a wise choice on the direction that you want to see BC go for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ashton. And our fourth and final speaker by random draw is the NDP candidate, Toni Boot.
Thank you, James. Good evening, fellow candidates, media personalities, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Toni Boot, and as James said, I am the NDP candidate for Penticton, for the Penticton riding. We are coming to you from the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. Limlet, thank you. And thanks also to James, David Priestday, for giving us this venue at the Penticton Lakeside Resort and Conference Center, and also the Real Estate Board for sponsoring this tonight. I was raised in Summerland in a multicultural family. I graduated from high school there, left for 12 years for school and work, and then returned to the Okanagan when I realized that Summerland was a pretty darn good place to raise your children. I have 2 boys. They were raised in my hometown. I have long had a passion for agriculture and sustainability, and this passion led me to start a business in 2005 called Grasslands Nursery. I ran that for 10 years before selling the business, and Grasslands was premised on making sure that there were plantings and services for people that wanted to conserve water in their Okanagan landscape. Prior to that, my husband and I had Kettle Valley Dried Fruits, also in Summerland, an agribusiness, and that was another business that was very successful and sold, and both businesses earned Business Excellence Awards from the Summerland Chamber of Commerce. In 2014, I ran for a seat on council, topped the polls, and filled that term for 4 years. And then in 2018, I became the mayor of the District of Summerland. I have taught for many years at Okanagan College in landscape horticulture and how to food garden. And in 2019, so last year, I completed my professional communications degree at Royal Roads University. I love serving my community. and it has been a privilege and honor to take a role in a number of different government bodies, including the Okanagan Basin Water Board for 2 years and the Regional District Okanagan-Similkameen for 6. I also sit on 2 non-governmental boards, the Grasslands Conservation Council and SOWIN, South Okanagan Women in Need Society. I am running because I want to continue my collaboration and cooperation in various regions. We are in difficult times. I want to be part of a government that will move BC forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Boot. All right, it's now time to begin the second part of our evening, which will be questions from the media. Again, they can be addressed to the entire panel, or they can be addressed to an individual candidate. Each of the 4 candidates have 3 challenges, and what they can do is at any time in the evening they can extend their speaking time for 1 minute, or they can respond to somebody else's question if they want. Again, reminder to the candidates, if you do wish to use the challenge, just make eye contact with me and I will acknowledge you when the person's done speaking. So for the first question of the evening, I'll go over to my colleague, senior reporter at the Penticton Herald, Mr. Joe Fries.
Thank you, James. We're going to start off with a round of individual questions. We've chosen these at random, and the first question's for Ms. Boot. Ms. Boot, you promised during the 2018 municipal election in Summerland that you would serve your full term as mayor. You've abandoned that promise. You're running to be MLA. What promises might you be making now, tonight, that you will abandon later, and why should people vote for you on that premise?
Thank you for that question, Joe. I had, in my opinion, I had some strong convictions on whether or not to run for the MLA after 2 years of being the mayor of the District of Summerland. And it became evident to me in those 2 years that many of the decisions that are made and all of the resources come from outside of the local government, so either the provincial government or the federal government. And it seemed to me that because the decisions that are being made at a senior level of government, like the provincial government, those decisions impact the residents of Summerland and areas, other local government areas, quite strongly. And so I decided that it would be best for me to advocate for my community and the other areas at the provincial government level.
I'll take a follow-up question, James.
Go ahead.
Should the opportunity come up to say, go back to become, back up, presuming you're elected as MLA, should the opportunity come up in, say, 2 years to run at the federal level or to go back to the local level, would you consider that? Would you make any kind of a commitment now as to how long you would serve as MLA?
I can make the commitment that I will serve the full term of the as an MLA. Now, I have learned that maybe I shouldn't be saying that kind of thing, but I have told your editor, James Miller, when he asked me why MLA and not MP, it's not, I know that I can affect change better and better support the people of this region at the MLA level. Personally, I don't want to be moving to Ottawa, and Victoria is great. I have a son that lives there. So yes, I will commit to the 4 years as the MLA. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on, Keith MacIntyre has our first challenge of the evening. You have 60 seconds, sir.
I don't want to burn the challenges too early, but actually I remember one of my first election forums, and Dan said the same thing, that when he was running for mayor, and you know, in all honesty, he's been a great MLA. His only fault is he's a politician controlled by his party. I appreciate the convictions that Ms. Boot has on this. What I don't appreciate, it's very clear how this election was called, that that this was planned, and it was strategically planned far in advance, and I don't appreciate elected officials that harm local businesses for election stunts to get in the paper knowing that they're going to be running in an election. And that's, to me, that's a much bigger issue than whether or not someone's going to fulfill their form or their term. You know, we've got a lot of career politicians in our province. We don't need more.
Okay, thank you. We're going to now move one spot. No, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to rebuttal. Do you want to use a challenge? You can use
That's what I was going to ask.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Challenge card for Ms. Boot. Go ahead, 60 seconds.
Thank you. I am presuming, Keith, that you are referring to what's been termed as the Confederate flag incident? Yes? Thank you. I can tell you, although this was not reported in the media because I didn't want to get into a he said, she said battle, Mr. Carter knew exactly what the Confederate flag meant. It is a symbol of hate, and he had been made aware of that in the years past and said that he understood the sensitivities and would no longer sell it. That happened twice. He chose to continue selling an offensive symbol, and as a business owner, he has every right to do that, but he made the decision to do that, and it resulted in yet another display of hatred in our community. I stood up for racism, and I will not apologize for doing so.
That is not the government's job.
Thank you. We're now going to go to our second media panelist. We generally have 5 for our meetings, but in the interest of social distancing and safety, we have limited the field to 2. But 2 great ones, and please welcome Chelsea Powrie, News Director for Castanet.net.
Hi, so my first question here is for Mr. MacIntyre. Mr. MacIntyre, your Libertarian platform calls for fewer government mandates in citizens' lives. You've been specifically vocal when it comes to COVID-19 related restrictions, but some of the most successful countries in the world at controlling the pandemic, like New Zealand, relied heavily on the government to make that happen. How do you feel British Columbia should be responding to COVID-19?
It's really awkward. I need to cough right now. That's from drinking water. You can look at all kinds of examples. You can look at Sweden, who has had a much more relaxed approach. New Zealand has quarantine hotels when they have 500 military personnel on these hotels. This disease is not affecting young people in a very serious way. I'll tell you what, if someone tried to take my children away and put them in a quarantine hotel, which is what Bill 19 that the NDP government has passed and that the Liberal government was complicit in, if someone tried to take my children and put them in a quarantine hotel, we're going to have some problems. We've given up a lot of our freedom, and we have this idea that we're doing a good job, and if we just stick with it, everything is going to be okay. But we've been in a reactive mode and not a strategic mode, and it's time to look at things very, very differently, especially in small regions like Penticton.
If I can do a follow-up there, yeah. So you... just to circle back to New Zealand as an example, I mean, New Zealand has 0 cases, and people are going out and having gatherings without masks. Wouldn't that be better?
I submit that we don't need to have the restrictions that we have here. 0 cases is not the goal. So we have a goal from our medical officials that the least number of deaths is the important thing. So we have had 2 deaths in the interior of BC. 2 deaths is essentially 0 statistically. If you look at the stats from the government of Canada, so we have 9,400 deaths in the entire country. 6,700 of those have been 80 plus. I don't want my 87-year-old grandma to die, but let's look at the statistics. There's been 305 Canadians under the age of 60 that have died of COVID, and a high percentage of those have had comorbidities. I'm not saying let's go out and start eating finger food and coughing on each other like we used to do, but we need to look at things a little bit different, in particular in small regions. When I worked for the CDC, these type of interventions province-wide in a diverse population, they do not make sense.
Thank you, Mr. MacIntyre. We'll go back to Joe Fries with his second question of the evening.
Moving on to Mr. Shumaker now. You're a retired pharmacist, and as we learned tonight, former drugstore owner and former police officer, which makes this question even more pertinent to you. I'm curious, with your professional experience, your view of the harm reduction models we have in place now with regard to drug use, such as giving people free needles, other supplies, those sorts of things. There was quite an issue in Penticton. There is still an issue with discarded needles. Just wondering your professional view on that program. Do you think it's effective? Is there a better way?
Oh, you asked me all the easy questions. Yes. The harm reduction, I believe in. We have choices. We can look after this. These are broken people. So we can either spend $200,000 and put them in the hospital, or we can do harm reduction for, say, whether it's free drugs or free needles at $65 a month. And so that's a choice. We make that. When I'm breaking these kind of problems down, I look at what is important. So this is important. There's important and urgent, and there's important and not urgent. Because we're spending so much money on important and urgent, we're not taking the time or spending the money on the important that's not urgent. Healthcare workers, yes. In 60 seconds, hard to solve that kind of problem.
Follow-up, Joe?
No, thanks.
Okay. And Joe does not have a follow-up, so I will go to Chelsea Powrie from Castanet.
All right, Mr. Ashton. ICBC became a piggy bank and later a bit of a, quote, dumpster fire under the Liberals. Why should the public now trust the Liberals to open up basic insurance to the private sector?
Well, thanks, Chelsea. It's long overdue. Being on Treasury Board and getting to see the internal operations, and when money was coming into ICBC and they had funding on their balance sheets along with school boards, instead of the province borrowing that money, going out to the markets and borrowing it, that money was utilized, but there was also a credit given, so if ICBC needed the money again, it could be there. A dumpster fire was a very good terminology created by the NDP. They also went out and got actuaries and got the worst case scenario to show what was going to happen. And now they're coming forward and saying that they're going to give everybody a refund. I had a young gentleman come to me and tell me that he is paying $5,200 a year for his insurance. It's probably worth twice what his car is worth. Something needs to be done. It's long overdue. I will say that it should have been done a long time ago. And for me, competition is your best customer. In my opinion, ICBC needs competition. Don't get rid of ICBC, but have competition so that people can have a choice. Long overdue.
Just as a follow-up here, I guess the question was, why should the public trust the Liberal government now, since that was a promise before, rather, to fix the ICBC problem?
Well, no governments are perfect, and I can't answer what it was like before I became elected, but I've got to see the inner workings. I've got to see the opportunities that are there. I've also got to see promises from the current government that have not come to fruition. I've come to see that pandemic pay was granted. Money was raised early this spring, and instead of being distributed to the people that needed it. Right now it's come out as election promises, like other promises have come forward by the party. So, the trust has to be in the individual. My opinion is that there is an opportunity now to give competition to ICBC that should make insurance a better resource and a better opportunity for all of those in British Columbia.
Thank you, Mr. Ashton, and thanks, Chelsea, for the question. We'll go back to Joe Fries.
Thank you. We'll start with the first panel question, and for this round, we'll start at my left with Mr. Ashton and working across, and then we'll switch it up for the next panel question. So this is the first question. You'll each have a minute to answer it, or you can use a challenge card. So the first question is from our friends at the Real Estate Board. This is their question. Everyone is interested in housing affordability. The problem is that it's very difficult to get new supply. 13 months ago, the BC government released the final report from a massive consultation process, something like 80 stakeholders, and it recommended ways for local governments and the province to work together to streamline new housing approvals. Will you commit to acting on that report? I'll start with you, Mr. Ashton.
Thank you, Joe. Long overdue. Maybe not that report, but do you know in Vancouver, where we have one of the biggest housing crises going on, it takes over 3 years to get permits through Municipal Hall? Municipalities have to take up some of this responsibility. It just can't be the provincial government and additional funds coming from the federal government when available. Municipalities have to step up. If you take a look at today, the rules and the regulations, and I don't want to emphasize what Keith is saying, but I can look back on when I was at the city of Penticton and what we tried to do to streamline processes, and it's long overdue. housing is supply and demand. And so what we have to do, and I know we're challenged here in Penticton with 2 lakes, the Indian Reserve to the west of us, the mountains to the east of us. But the big stop is, and there's some incredible people that work at the municipalities, but the politicians and elected officials also have to ensure that there's a streamlined process to get those homes in the ground quicker and to get people in homes as quick as possible.
Thank you. Toni?
Thank you for that question. Housing used to be a local government issue only, but lately it has become such a crisis that the provincial government has taken on the role of working with housing affordability and housing in general. There is quite a spectrum of housing, from transition housing, shelters or transition housing, right up to luxury homes. But there is a big gap for what's called the missing middle. So that's double income families that still cannot afford to get into the housing market. The speculation tax was added by the BC NDP government, which resulted in 11,000 new units opening up so that people that live in British Columbia can actually have a place to stay.
Thanks, Ms. Boot. Mr. MacIntyre?
This is a prime example of where government is getting in the way. Municipal governments should absolutely have the ability to make their own decisions, and I'm not going to blame it on the municipal governments. I'm going to blame it on the provincial government for having too many regulations and getting in the way. Again, Victoria is making decisions that make sense, they think, for the Lower Mainland that don't make sense here, and that includes the speculation tax. I've been I've emailed several finance ministers since I moved here in 2010 about the property transfer tax. I heard Christy Clark actually say to a group, and she said, yeah, this property transfer tax, this so-called luxury tax that's been around for 35 years, you have to pay $8,000 on buying a $500,000 home. And she said, yeah, that's a tax that punishes families, but we can't figure out a way to deal with the lost $1.5 billion in revenue. Come on, because you can't think of a better way, you're going to continue to punish families for moving in these times when they want to move closer to their families? Enough.
Thank you. Mr. Shumaker?
Yes, as day 13 as a politician, I don't have all the numbers and not privileged to the inside information, but if we do a study and we ask the experts, it makes sense to listen to the experts. If a family does not have a house, they can't take part in the economy. So we do have to step up and make a difference. One of the things I find interesting, BC Housing actually does some really good stuff. One of the problems that I see there is that if I'm in Edmonton, it's going to be a cold winter, I head down to Penticton. BC Housing has no residency requirement. And I think that's something that as a provincial government we could change and look after our own. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a brand new question, so I'll go back to Chelsea Powrie from Castanet.
This is a related question to housing. Do you support expanding the current speculation tax to Penticton, the Penticton region? Why or why not? And we'll start, I think, are we going back? We'll start with you, Mr. Shumaker.
Lucky me. From where I sit, I'm an average guy. I don't have to worry about the speculation tax. So from my point of view, and maybe a lot of people's point of view, the speculation tax affects those guys that are flipping $1 million property, thereby preventing us average guys or my kids from getting a house. So it makes sense to me, without seeing the figures, that I would support a speculation tax.
Okay, and we are shuffling the order so that people aren't speaking in the same order before and after. So Ms. Boot, speculation tax.
Sorry, James, we told them already we were going to go back left to right and right
Sorry,
to left.
okay, so whose question is it?
This is the panel question, and it's to Mr. MacIntyre now.
Okay, thank you.
Going left.
Mr. MacIntyre.
Short answer is we need to stop punishing people with taxes, especially ones that seem to make sense in the Lower Mainland that don't make sense in the rest of BC. I'm going to use the rest of the minute to explain why I didn't thank the First Nations when I started. And the reason is I think that the words become meaningless the more that you say them. And I back it up by, I have a co-working space on West Bank First Nations. I've talked to two chiefs in near Headley and in West Bank. I have a First Nations entrepreneur in my office. And conversations and understanding and not trying to use Indigenous people for votes, and that's it's frustrating to me that it's this lip service that continues to happen, and we're not having the meaningful conversations that we need to have.
Thank you. Ms. Boot.
Thank you. I believe the question was about expanding the speculation tax to Penticton. Is that correct, Chelsea?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Seeing how well that has worked in other areas, including West Kelowna and Kelowna, and has opened up those 11,000 homes, I think that there could be some consideration being used for the speculation tax in Penticton as well. It would help with the housing, if what has been done already is any indication, it would help with the housing crisis somewhat.
Thank you, Ms. Boot. And finally, Mr. Ashton.
Thank you for the question. Absolutely, positively not. Speculation tax is a tax grab. Let's take a look at where it should go, to the flippers. If you're buying a condo or in pre-registration and then flipping it out, that's where additional tax, if that's where the direction the government wants to go. But speculation tax, no. Perfect example. Brotherhood of a friend owns a property in Vancouver. They can't even lease it to the brother who has a business in Vancouver and a business here to go back and forth with, because they don't pay the normal stratified rent because it's family, but they don't qualify under a speculation tax, so they're faced with paying on a condo that they own, that the family owns in in Vancouver, I apologize. So no, I do not want to see it. I don't want to see it expanded whatsoever. I want to see it withdrawn. And I'm also very curious as why it was withdrawn from the leader of the Greens Party, Andrew Weaver, in Victoria. Very interesting, days before the South Hat.
Thank you. A brand new question, and back to Joe Fries from the Herald.
Thank you. And just to be clear, we're going to switch up the order now, randomize it a little bit. James is going to be handling that aspect. Who's going to go first then?
Ms. Boot can go first on this.
Okay, thank you. This question's for the panel, so we'll go to each of you. My question is this: what is one big idea you personally have that you'll take with you to Victoria? Something not in your party's platform, something from the heart, something you want to do that will genuinely make life better for people.
So we will go Ms. Boot, Mr. Shumaker, Mr. Ashton, Mr. MacIntyre. So you're up, Ms. Boot.
That's a great question. I have to think about that a little bit, but I realize that I'm under pressure for 1 minute. I think that I would like to, and I don't think that this is a particular project, but I would really like to continue on in the vein of how I've been working for Summerland. And that is make sure that there is lots of cooperation and collaboration. There has been a lot during the pandemic, especially in the early days, between the regional district and all of the municipalities around this area. And I think that that is a really good model in order to get things done. And so that kind of philosophy is what I would like to really continue to push at the provincial level.
Mr. Shumaker.
Something I get my teeth into. I talked earlier about what's important and urgent, what's important and not urgent. Important and not urgent. Drug abuse, delinquency. Iceland, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Iceland Project. They had up to 40% of their teenagers, drugs, alcohol, smoking. They were in a crisis. They called a psychologist from the States named Milkman. He came in, all the parties agreed. Every child 16 and under, you want to play a sport, it's paid for. Here's your equipment. The coaches are paid for, no cost. You want to take up the fiddle or the trumpet, you name it, we pay. There, after I can't remember, it's 10 or 15 years, that 40% went down to 3%. What's important but not urgent? It's so important. When I win the 10 million, every kid in Penticton gets free swimming lessons.
Thank you.
And piano lessons.
Mr. Ashton.
Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you for the question, but it's a bit preemptive. I actually have something that I'm going to be announcing in the next few days that is going to be what I consider, and I think many will, an entire benefit to the entire Okanagan. Tonight, I'm just not prepared to give it out, so I'm kind of sitting here with a bit of a smile on my face, but it's a very good question and a good lead up, which you'll hear about in the next few days.
Okay, Mr. MacIntyre.
I appreciate the Icelandic story. I'm actually 1/4 Icelandic, and my great-grandmother, or my grandmother with severe dementia, who my parents rescued from her care home in early March, is doing quite fantastic, who I think probably would be either very severely worse than she is now, or perhaps even dead with the isolation that's happened. So my passion and why I'm running in this election is I can be an independent voice in the legislature. We haven't had an independent elected in BC since I think the early 90s, and it's something we're severely lacking in Canadian politics. You guys have seen me over the last 10 years in Penticton. I'm genuine. I don't back down. I ask the tough questions, and this is really what we need in our politics today, is someone that is not beholden to a major party and the next election, and in particular, controlled by what's happening in the Lower Mainland of Victoria. We need independence.
Thank you. It's Chelsea's question. So Chelsea Powrie.
All right, for the whole panel. The regional district of Okanagan-Similkameen was created by the BC government in 1966. Since then, its board has grown to 19 directors, all with alternates, all drawing a monthly salary plus pay for attending meetings. That now costs taxpayers about $500,000 per year. Those 19 people manage a budget much smaller than those in communities like Sutherland and Penticton. If elected, will you seek to rein in the regional district?
Okay, we're going to answer in the reverse order from the previous question, so that will begin with Mr. MacIntyre.
Sorry, I was very passionate about that last question. Can you just quickly summarize?
Yeah, will you be seeking to rein in the regional district, given that it has 19 members, costs about $500,000 per year for taxpayers in the region, and yet manages a budget much smaller than those in communities like Sutherland and Penticton?
And again, this is another example of bureaucracy, but on the other hand, the regional district has more knowledge and more understanding of what's going on in their region. It sounds a little bit expensive to me, but all government sounds expensive to me. There's just a ton of bureaucracy and a ton of waste and a ton of talking. And I look at it from the lens of, should the government be doing this? Is there a better way to do it? And if there is, we should open that up. We have a region of really, really talented people. Penticton and Peachland, Summerland, Naramata, we have so many talented people here. Why are we relying on the government as our parent to continue to make our decisions for us? There is so much waste in government. I can't even describe the billions I've seen just in tech procurement alone that we could save to do great things.
Thank you. Mr. Ashton.
Well, thank you. You know, the regional district does fulfill an integral part of the Okanagan, but what you need to be doing is asking those that are elected to the regional district or those that are represented. And I need to turn the clock back to 2008, 2009, when the city of Penticton and the regional area were going through tough times. 18 positions at the city of Penticton were some of them were filled, but 18 positions were removed and 10 from the regional district were removed. I was mayor and a chair of the regional district at the time and a mayor of the city of Penticton. It's up to elected officials to rein things in and hold it. It's not up to provincial officials to say, thou shalt do this. So there is an onus on both of those entities and to the contributors, whether you're a municipality contributing to it or an area contributing to it. So I would say the challenge is with them, not dictation coming from above.
Thank you. Mr. Shumaker, you're up.
Once again, my inexperience shows up. Did you say 90 people or 19?
19.
Oh, one, okay. I feel relieved already. So I just cleaned up 80% of the problem. I believe in general, and never to compare to the United States, but I believe our Canadian politicians are overpaid. One of the things I can promise is that after I spend 2 terms in, you can have half my pension. It's gone. Save you a bunch of money there. I think we should always be looking for places to save. And if there's some waste there, then we check it out. Once again, we ask the accountants, the experts. Thank you.
And Ms. Boot, you have final word on this question.
Thank you. I believe I've spoken a couple of times already about the importance of regional collaboration and cooperation, and that's exactly what happens at the regional district, Okanagan, Similkameen, and all the regional districts in the province. Representation on the RGOS, I think, is very important for all of the regions, so not just the municipalities, but for the electoral areas as well. That is their local government. I know it's called a regional district government, but it is a local government for those participants. I think it's important to recognize that the hospital, like the David Campy Tower, that is paid through the regional hospital board district that is part of the regional district, Okanagan, Similkameen, as well as community centers and recreation facilities, not only in electoral areas, but in some of the municipalities as well. So it serves all of the people, and I think that it should continue.
Thank you. Brand new question, and over to Joe Fries.
Thank you. As we can see in Mr. Ashton's campaign ads, he almost single-handedly saved Trout Creek and West Bench schools from closing in 2016. However, that dedicated funding for rural schools has now been rolled into school districts' total funding envelopes. And that was the Rural School Enhancement Fund, I believe it was called. Yeah. That is gone now, as we understand it, and it's just rolled in with the block funding the way it was before, which sort of led to these schools almost being closed. All that said, where do you stand on this issue? Do you think there should be special funding for rural schools like West Bench, Trout Creek, Kaleden, and Naramata?
And the order for this will be Mr. MacIntyre, Mr. Ashton, Ms. Boot, Mr. Shumaker. So, Mr. MacIntyre, you may open.
Was that for all of us or just?
Yeah, that's a panel question, yes.
Okay, so this is a big issue when I was running for school trustee, and I actually had a lot of discussions with people who were the chief negotiators with between the ministry and the province throughout the different governments. And again, it is a systemic problem with the government and the toxic relationship that is the employer and the employees with the BCTF and the Ministry of Education. And so what happened there, it was very clear, and I saw the path that was happening. The end state was to fund these rural schools. They were funded in order to get more votes. That is absolutely true. I know it. I can't break confidentiality with the people I talk to tell you that. But you know, when are we going to wake up and stop letting our politicians dupe us with these things? We need real people in government, actual people, and not politicians. And Dan, you're great. You're actually a really great person. I'm not calling you on that, but we need more real people, not politicians.
Thank you. Mr. Ashton.
Well, thank you. And Joe, thanks for the question. I did not single-handedly do that. There was an incredible amount of parents that were active in it. There was a member of the school board, God rest his soul, that was incredibly active in it. There was opportunity that was presented. There was a question of how Trout Creek School came onto the map, first of all. And the minister, now the Minister of Education, Rob Fleming, was here. He was a critic at the time, and he was very vehement that that should be carried on. Well, he's now the minister. He's the one that has to answer where that Rural Enhancement Fund is gone. And now it's being lumped into the school board. I think there is a huge opportunity for this government and any government to keep those schools open. I live in Trout Creek. I have never seen so many young kids now again in Trout Creek than since when I was a young child. And it's good to see in those schools, rural or not, make such a huge difference in the education of children. So it's not only just up to the school board, it's up to all of us to ensure that those schools are preserved and protected so that the teachers can give that incredible education that they do to those young children.
Thank you. Ms. Boot.
I think everybody here tonight agrees that education for our young people is critically important. After all, they're the ones that are going to lead us through in the future. Rural dollars for rural schools. It's kind of tricky to say. If there is the need for that, then absolutely. There were a lot of schools closed in the time of the BC Liberals, and the BC NDP government is starting to build them back. It's really, really important. Minister Fleming, for example, with the sale of the school in Penticton, transferred and allowed this capital to go into a high school gym that is definitely needed, desperately needed in the Summerland Secondary School. So again, working together with local government, these things can happen.
Thank you. Mr. Shumaker.
Once again, I am in learning mode. I am very pro-education. Fits in with my what's important, not urgent. Do I know if we close the school or not? I'm sorry, I don't. I would ask the experts. You go and look at the schools. On the other hand, we can't judge everything just by dollars. One of the things that I do see as I go by schools after 6 o'clock is they're totally empty. And I think that's something that could change. The gyms, yeah. That is something I think that the provincial government could change. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are at 7:52 p.m., so I think we have time for one more panel question in our first half. We will answer in the reverse order to the previous question, and I'll go over to Chelsea Powrie to find out what that question is.
All right. So the city of Penticton has recently expressed interest in hiring 2 more RCMP officers to help address local crime rates that have caused mounting frustrations amongst locals. Is more police the answer, or are there solutions that should be explored other than that? Where do you stand on the defund police movement?
Okay, you're up first, Mr. Shumaker.
Lots of time to prepare. Where do I stand on police? I was an ex-member, so I guess automatically I'm defend, not defund. The answer, though, isn't just more police. Yes, we need a few more. The thing comes between the urgent and the not urgent. What we need is to spend some more money on social workers. Example, a month ago, a druggie was sleeping in my truck. The police were there in 8 minutes. Thank you. I consider that urgent. They had him down to the office, booked, and he was out in 4 hours to go back to do whatever he wanted, because this broken person doesn't have a social worker or somebody to point him in the right direction, and he wasn't part of the Iceland project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Boot, you're up.
Thank you. So there also was a question in there about defund the police movement, but before I speak about that, I'd like to say that the expectations on RCMP and other first responders have changed dramatically over the last several years. I would not change the fact that criminals need to be prosecuted as criminals. But many of the response calls that the RCMP and other first responders are making are to people that are not necessarily criminals, but they are people that are on hard times. They may have mental illness, they may be homeless, they may be have addictions. The people that are feeding those addictions are the criminals that need to be prosecuted. The people that are addicted are not the people that need to be prosecuted. They need more supports. So defunding the police to me means not taking away money, but it means reallocating those funds to exactly as Ted said. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ashton.
Thank you very much. As the mayor of Penticton, I was in Regina twice in 2 separate years. begging Regina so that when their officer recruits come out, that we could take them and we would split the cost between Ottawa, the province, and the municipality of Penticton. Our detachment levels go down with pregnancies, with vacation, with accidents, so we're always not at a full contingent. And so what that would do is help bring up that contingent, and that would go on for a year with a reassessment of the recruit at that time. And also, I am a staunch fan of officers, our CMP, having additional help, whether it be social workers or mental health workers. As what Ms. Boot has said, it's changed. Policing has changed dramatically, and those police officers need help. And what that would entail is getting more people into maybe some of the offsetting effects that are caused by some of the issues that they're having, and keeping away the criminal side of it and separating the mental health and the social issues so those police have an opportunity and additional help.
Thank you, sir. Mr. MacIntyre, you have final word on this question.
Yeah, so first, the funding of the police is a municipal issue, and through my Smart Cities work, I talked to the RCMP extensively, and the council and staff of Penticton, and so we spent about $10 million of our $52 million budget on policing, and I'm not sure that we really are getting the service we want. And this is not a dig at the police. The defund the police movement is really a little bit misunderstood. It's not taking away officers. It's changing the perspective away from enforcement and punishment and into fixing the problem. So as the other candidates said, there's other ways to do things. The Community Active Support Table that we were working on, is it a housing issue? Is it an addiction issue? Is it a mental health issue? Rather than arresting people, because the problem is the RCMP, once you start arresting someone, you get them in the paperwork process. I worked directly with the RCMP and the bylaw officers almost daily at the Shatford Centre. I was part of a sting operation that I worked with them where they arrested 5 drug dealers in 2 days, improving the safety around Penn High.
Thank you. I lied to you. I hope everybody's having fun, but if you're not, you're going to find this next section fun. Joe wants to do a rapid fire round before we take our 5-minute comfort break, and just in the interest of timing, we'll go from my left to right and then right, so back and forth or whatever, and Joe will explain how it works.
I think we have time for 2 of these rapid fire questions, and it's going to be what I think is a real simple question. It just gives a quick response. You don't have to take up the full minute or anything like that. Just a bit of a fun question to cap off this segment. So the first question, we'll start with Mr. Ashton. How did you prepare for tonight?
It started in 1999, getting involved in the community officially at Penticton, and before that was being on a ton of boards and working with a ton of agencies here in Penticton.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Ashton. What I was getting at was, tonight, how did you prepare? Did you hire? I think Joe Biden hired someone who looked like Trump to insult him. Did you do something like that, or did you study the playbook? Did you meditate? How did you prepare for this specific event?
I had a nice meal and thought about things that would be asked tonight and try and work my way through it. But again, it started in 1999 officially. So
Thank you. Ms. Boot.
Well, I did my homework. I think that the best way to approach forums or debates, I know this isn't a debate, but any kind of speaking or presentation is to be prepared. So I feel that that's the work that I needed to do, and I got it done.
Mr. MacIntyre.
Yeah, I've been subconsciously working on what I'm going to say since I heard about this forum. In particular today, I was going to spend a lot of time practicing my opening statement, but I got 2 businesses to run, and things are important. So what I actually did to prepare when I got home, I took a nap, and I woke up and I recorded a few different opening statements, realized I talked too much and I needed to shorten them down, and then I had some wine, a hamburger, and a glass of rum.
Thank you. Mr. Shumaker.
How did I prepare? I start at 3:30 in the morning, and it just does not quit. It goes over and over. Yes, I do meditate. I've probably read more in the last 13 days than I have in the last years. What I did is I said to myself, remember what your values are, remember where you come from.
Thank you. And we're going to go in the opposite order with 15-second rapid-fire answers, and Chelsea Powrie with the final question of the first half.
All right, final question of the first half. Who is your political idol?
Oh, my goodness.
Who is your political idol? Or a political idol.
A political idol. I know who's not down south, but that doesn't work. I'm blank. I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll come back to you at the end, Mr. MacIntyre.
I don't have a political idol. I think our political system is really, really broken. I think our democracy is no longer what it was meant for. We've gotten ourselves into a really weird state where we have a bunch of politicians trying to get elected, and we forgot even why democracy existed, and it was for real people to do good things and collaborate together, not fight with each other.
Thank you. Ms. Boot?
Well, I'm embarrassed, but I'm at a loss for her name right now, but that would be the head of state for New Zealand.
Jacinda Ardern.
Yes, Jacinda, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ashton.
Ronald Reagan has been. I was in the United States going to school when he came in for the president. I admired him before as a governor and admired him an awful lot more when he became the president of the United States.
Okay, Mr. Shumaker, have you thought?
I got it. It's Chrétien, no question. And his white paper and the interviews I've seen of him after. What a guy.
Okay, thank you. And if anyone at home is interested, mine would be Congressman Sonny Bono. Did a great job in Congress, and I enjoyed his variety show with his ex-wife. Anyways, with that said, it's time for a 5-minute comfort break. Folks at home, we're not walking out, so please stick with us, and we'll be back with the second half, and starting with our very fun Candidates Ask the Other Candidates question format. Stay with us.
5 to 6 days a week.
Would anybody like some more water? Candidates, are you fine for water, or does anybody want more? You okay? All right. Good. Everybody's okay. Great. And welcome back to the second half of the Penticton Herald's All Candidates Forum for the provincial election in the Penticton riding. Again, thank you to the South Okanagan Real Estate Board and the Penticton Lakeside Resort for their sponsorship of tonight's event. I'd also like to send a shout out to, although they didn't sponsor, but we hired them, but they're doing an outstanding job, Groove V Productions, and thank you to Andrew Jacobite and his team. Just a note from Groove V candidates, if it's tough, we've been all told for the last 7 months not to touch our face, but if possible, try to avoid touching the podium when you're not speaking, because all microphones are live. So if you're able to make a note of that when it's not your turn to speak, if you're able not to grab at the podium, that would be helpful to the visitors at home. And now we are going to change the format slightly and let Joe and Chelsea have a brief rest. And this is one of my favorite parts of debate, and this is actually as close to a debate as we get. And that will be each of the 4 candidates is allowed to ask one question to any of the other 4 questions. Not a panel question, but any of the other 4 candidates. They have 1 minute to ask the question, if they wish to give some background during that time. The candidate has 1 minute to answer. If the first candidate asking the question wishes a follow-up, again, they may do so for 1 minute, at which point the candidate who was asked the question will have the final word for 1 minute. So always interesting, if anything, to see who gets asked the questions. Again, everybody has lots of challenge cards left. If you would like to contribute to the conversation and you're not necessarily asked, by all means, use one of your challenges if you wish. And again, we drew off camera for the order that we were going to allow this, and so Ted Shumaker drew the first question. So Ted, who is your question for?
Was I supposed to have this already ahead of time?
Yes. Do you have someone you'd like to ask a question to?
I do not.
Okay. Candidates, are you okay if I come back to him? Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, that's fine. So if there's somebody who you'd like to ask a loaded question to, or just a friendly question, that's fine. So Keith MacIntyre, you drew the second spot, so who would you like to ask a question to?
Well, it's pretty tough to decide who to ask, but I'm gonna ask my friend Dan, who's helped me out a lot over the years. I'm gonna ask you about hospitals, and I've noticed on your social media, which I know is not you writing them. I read all my own social media posts. We unfortunately don't have the $13 million of per vote subsidies that the other parties have. I actually love writing my own posts, but I noticed a lot of talk about, and Ms. Boot said about it too, about the RDOS helps pay for the hospital, and Dan got the hospital for us. Well, we all know that's a public-private partnership, and the hospital shouldn't be here because we have a good politician. I noticed this when I was a young person in my hometown, and we had the Speaker of the House in Alberta, and we got a hospital. Why do you get hospitals? Because you have a good politician. And realistically, what it is the hardworking people that have raised the donation, the hospital foundation, the public-private partnership that built the hospital. Dan, I ask you, are you taking credit for building this hospital?
Absolutely not. Let's get some first rate. Keith, on social media, yes, there's a collaboration between myself and somebody else that helps me out when I'm not able, so please withdraw that part of it. Second of all, the hospital, we had $34 million here in Penticton. I was on Treasury Board, I was able to get that money. I had got a full unanimous vote by the Regional District Board to release all that money at once. That money went in the ground right away. It allowed that hospital to start 1 year early. And the people that are paying for that hospital are the people of the Regional District of Okanagan, Similkameen. We pay 40% of the hospital fees here. Guess what? In the Lower Mainland, ask how much they pay. Nothing. They pay zero. But here in the rural areas, we pay for that. And so no, I am not taking credit for building the hospital. I'll take credit for helping facilitate it through a word that's been used a lot here tonight, cooperation and collaboration with the regional district, with the municipality of Penticton, and with the provincial government.
Do you wish to follow up?
Yeah, again, I just have to ask, why do we get hospitals? Not because we need them. Why do we get hospitals? Because people have to fight for them. And again, this is a systemic problem with the way our province's population is set up, where most of the population is down in the Lower Mainland and Victoria, and they're making all the decisions, and things aren't making sense here. So why do we need someone like Dan to stand up for us to get a hospital that we deserve and to go through all these processes? The government, if they're going to be doing these kinds of things, should be doing their job.
Okay, you have final word, 60 seconds, Mr. Ashton.
Well, Keith, with all due respect, it wasn't politicians and elected officials. It was the people of the regional district and the doctors and the nurses and the hospital staff and the cleaners that knew that the hospital needed to be changed and updated. And everybody worked hard. And Beth Campbell was the mayor at the time. We doubled the requisition in taxes at the regional district so that we would have the money, and it was originally going to be about $100 million, but with the new medical costs and the new single rooms and everything else, it ballooned and it became $312 million, if I remember it correctly. The decision to build the hospital was made by the people here and the contributors, and were people from car raffles and everything else to Mr. Campy putting the phenomenal amount that he did to make a difference so that we could have that. So it was a decision of the people of this area to get a new hospital, not an elected official or elected officials in Victoria.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. And by random draw, Dan Ashton, sir, you are now allowed to ask one question of any of your opponents.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, James, for yourself, to Toni. Toni, just a question, and I've known you a long time, but Keith talks about politicians and promises and everything else, but where do you sit with $10 daycare? Where do you sit with a $400 rental credit? Where do you sit with pandemic pay that was authorized by the legislature in March that has never been delivered to those people that are on the front line? Where do you sit with those promises from a government that you want to be part of?
Sorry, I should have been writing this down. The first one was $10 a day daycare.
$10 daycare, where is it? Second one was a $400 rental credit.
Yes.
Where is it? And the third one was pandemic pay that was authorized by the legislature of British Columbia, March. Where is it? Because it hasn't been delivered to the people that need it.
Okay, thank you. In order, I will speak first to the $10 a day daycare. There are 53 communities in British Columbia that have been chosen as pilot sites for the $10 a day care, including the one in Penticton, which is at the OSNS Center. And Recently, they were supposed to, that pilot project was supposed to expire in March, and it has been extended into 2021 because of the pandemic. Excuse me. Not too long ago, there was announced a $3 million investment into another child care center here in Penticton for another 116 spaces. So this work is being done over a 10-year plan, and the work has started and will continue to do if the BC NDP get the mandate for the next 4 years.
Mr. Ashton, do you wish to follow up? No.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Boot, it's your turn to ask a question of any of your opponents.
Thank you. I'm going to ask my question of Dan. Dan, yes, we have known each other for a long time, and you have been in opposition for 3.5 years, and you said it's hard to be in that role. Some in the media have said you have played your role as Indigenous affairs critic quietly, whatever that means. I see from your advertising that you are proud of projects that were done in the last 5, 6, 7 years even, and I'm not saying that those are not good projects. I think they were great projects, but people are really hurting in this riding since the pandemic hit. Can you give us some specific examples of how your office has reached out to government to help the people here who are struggling?
We reach out on a continual basis, Toni. You wouldn't believe the people that have come into the office when I was the MLA, and I'm not the MLA now, but our office is still open, and it's a community office of people looking for help during this pandemic period. And that's what that office is for. We don't care if you voted for us or voted for me, didn't vote, or have nothing to do with politicians whatsoever. That office is there to help people, and we help everybody. And that office has continually helped people through these troubling times. And it's not just people that are offset by mental illnesses and substance abuses. They're offset by people that are losing their businesses. You wouldn't believe some of the calls and individuals that I've had to handle on a basis, and the staff have had to handle. We have staff in Peachland, Summerland, and Penticton that have had to handle the opportunities that don't exist. Again, we're still waiting for that pandemic pay, and so are those people out there that need that money now.
Thank you.
Do you wish to follow up? Ms. Boot, would you like to follow up?
I was looking for specific examples, but I understand the need for privacy to protect certain people that have,
That's true.
come in and spoken to you. So I won't ask you for any more details. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Toni. Thank you.
And Mr. MacIntyre is going to use his second challenge of the night.
Yeah, I'm going to address the idea of pandemic pay and how the MLA office has helped constituents through this. I have not heard one elected official ask really hard questions to the government about what they're doing with the COVID Emergency Measures Act, which gives blanket powers to any government that no government should have. And I got an email from a friend who emailed the BC CDC about PCR rates, which is much too complicated to talk about in 1 minute. But there are serious issues with how we're testing and how the cases are being done. And our MLA said, go talk to Dr. Bonnie Henry. I don't know enough about that. And I think it's a responsibility of our elected officials for the most serious thing that is happening around the world and in our lives right now to have a deep understanding of this pandemic, and no government across the entire Canada, no elected official is asking the tough questions. Agree with me or not, but we need to have some of these questions asked.
Do you wish to use a challenge card? No? All right, Mr. Shumaker, have you thought up a question?
I did.
Okay, who would you like to ask it to?
Keith.
Okay, all right, go ahead. You have 60 seconds.
Keith made a comment about our opening statement on and acknowledging that we're on land of the Silex-speaking people. Mm-hmm. My belief there is that what really works, first of all, I am guilty of that. What really works is relationships. Mm-hmm. And yet, I need some advice on, I can't just walk across the river and say, hi, Indigenous people, here I am.
Why not?
How do we start a relationship? Any advice for me?
Actually, you can just walk across the channel and talk to them. There used to be a connection between the Penticton Indian Band and Penticton, and I learned a lot of this through the Smart Cities Challenge when there used to be people going to school together and doing sports together, and somehow that changed over the years, and I'm not really sure why. I'm not from Penticton, but why is that? Why is there no transit to the Penticton Indian Band? Why are we isolating this group of people from our city? Why are we not connected? And again, it is the relationships, and absolutely you can go across and talk to people. I have friends that used to work at the school up there. I talked to a former chief the other day. I don't know why there feels like there's a barrier between us and the Penticton Indian Band. There doesn't have to be. I'm gathering there's some tensions from the past. I remember being on the airport committee and the city was talking about taking over the airport, and Jonathan Kruger said, why are you even discussing that without talking to me first? And I was like, yeah, well, why aren't you?
Okay, do you wish a follow-up?
I do.
Go ahead.
So part of my growing up was in Lytton, BC, where the reserve is one of the streets that divides the town in two. Mm-hmm. And it actually was really good in the good old days. Now maybe I just had some bad luck, but I did go across and I cycled in there, and a guy came out and asked me, "What the heck are you doing here?" Now maybe I just hit the wrong guy, so maybe I'll get some names from you.
Yeah, I find that a very difficult statement. And I grew up in a small redneck town in Alberta, and I will fully admit that I grew up kind of middle class racist. We didn't call people out, but there was this little bit of tension and misunderstanding of people. And as I grew up in the world and I experienced all kinds of different people, you realize that these tensions, there's reasons why these tensions are happening. And in my co-working space in West Bank, I've had the opportunity to talk to some fabulous Indigenous entrepreneurs. Frank Bush is in there, and he's running a company called Nation Fund that is helping Indigenous people get equity in things like transmission lines and pipelines and negotiating with the federal government. And I think, for me, I didn't even consider what his background was. I'm like, you're a really, really smart guy. And I think this idea, as Penticton in particular, we have the channel and it is a physical barrier. And to me, it doesn't make sense. I don't understand why we don't communicate and collaborate more.
Thank you, sir.
May I use a challenge?
You certainly may, and Ms. Boot will use her second challenge of the
night. It's not really a challenge, but I wanted to speak to you, Ted. You've asked for a little bit of assistance,
yeah.
And I can tell you it's pretty easy. Our Indigenous neighbors, they're people too, although they share their land with us. All you have to do is say, "Hey, can I take you for coffee?" And that's the best way to get a relationship started. It's kind of like, if you wanted to, now I know you've been married 25 years, but it's kind of like if you wanted to date somebody that you were interested, "Hey, can I buy you a drink? Can I take you for coffee?" I've worked very closely with the Penticton Indian Band in my pre-politics life, and then even more so as the mayor of Summerland. I think it's really important as we move forward in this pandemic period to recognize the traditional ecological knowledge that our Indigenous neighbors bring for climate change and also for resource management.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that ends our round of candidates ask the questions, and thank you. They were all very good questions. We're going to go back to our media panel in a moment. Just a note about our safe social distancing. There are a grand total of 13 people in the Lakeside Salon this evening. Thank you to the Lakeside, not only for donating the facility, but also prior to the event at about 6 o'clock tonight, they were sanitizing the podiums, the chairs, the lecterns, and thank you very much for that. So in total, as I said, we have 13 people. We have 4 candidates. We have 3 media people, 2 timers, 2 from the production crew, plus 2 outside media, a photographer and a cameraman, plus 1 black fly. I do realize, candidates, and thank you for your participation tonight. 100% of the candidates agreed to come, which I thank you. It has been commented that 60 seconds is short when we're talking about very detailed issues, and it certainly is. But in the interest of timing is one thing, but this is also a nonpartisan event. So hopefully tonight we have touched on at least all the important issues to the folks who are watching on home, on Facebook Live or YouTube. So we're going to go back to our media panel and get in as many questions as possible. Some are for the panel and some are individual. A reminder, Mr. MacIntyre and Ms. Boot have used 2 challenges. Mr. Ashton and Mr. Shumaker haven't. You're welcome to use that time at any point in the evening, or you can even save it up till your closing addresses. So I will go back to my colleague Joe Fries with his first question of the second half of the program.
Thank you. We're going to go back to the individual questions, and we'll do it in the same order as last time. So my first question is for Ms. Boot. Mr. Ashton was Penticton Mayor in 2013 when he was elected as MLA. Before he was elected as MLA, he made a commitment that if he won, he would pay for the cost of a by-election. Later that year, he cut a check for $32,000 to the city of Penticton. Assuming you are elected MLA and there's a by-election in Summerland, will you commit right now to covering the cost of that by-election?
Well, first of all, I can tell you that the cost of a by-election in Summerland with the population about third the size of Penticton won't be $30,000. Phew. I can also tell you that Mr. Ashton, and I appreciate the work that you did for Penticton and helping them through that by-election. I'm not in the same socioeconomic bracket as Mr. Ashton is. You know, I know his family history, and I know that they worked hard to get where they are. I think that I have worked hard to get where I am. But the reality is, I live in a co-housing situation in Summerland. I own a small house, and it's co-owned with a friend of ours. So I'm not in a position to cover the roughly, I don't know, $8,000 to $10,000 that it would cost to do a by-election in Summerland.
Thank you.
And there's no challenges. Okay, Mr. Ashton will comment.
This isn't a challenge, this is a comment. You know, it's not, it wasn't about the money. It was what we had to do in the city of Penticton and all those lives that I mentioned earlier that were affected, the 18 positions at the city of Penticton, the 10 positions at the regional district. Yeah, I could afford it. I actually literally took it out of my kids' funding that they still challenge me today for university on it. But yes, I could afford it because it was the thing to do. The important part that I saw about it was if you, and Toni, I say this with the utmost respect, but when you make a promise to the people that have elected you, you make a promise to the community, yeah, things change, but when things change, I think you have to think back on what you've said and to stick with it. I think you're an admirable candidate for an MLA, an admirable candidate. And I appreciate the opportunity that we have, but it's trust. And we hear Keith talking about trust of politicians. That's the one thing that people look at. And when you break those bonds or those words, that's trouble for everybody.
Thank you. Chelsea Powrie.
So my question is for Mr. MacIntyre. So you're all about smaller government, yet you do a lot of business with government, and the Shatford Centre under your watch with the Okanagan School of the Arts relied on regular assistance from city taxpayers. So how do you square that with your views of wanting people relying less on government?
Yeah, I'll address the Shatford Centre first. So one, we weren't relying on government assistance. We were holding the city accountable for promises that were made. So the city promised to take care of that building. We were the leaseholders, and somehow that got lost over the years. So it actually hurt me to take those grants, but what I did say, and I promised the city staff, is we won't take those grants forever. We will take those grants and become a sustainable organization, while so many other organizations in Penticton do not. They get the grants and they continue to get them year over year. With my software company, I work directly with government. I've been on provincial government procurement improvement initiatives where they've asked for my advice on how to improve tech procurement. I've been involved in defense, medical, and the lack of innovation that's happening and the billions and billions of dollars that are wasted. They've taken some of my advice, but it's too slow. And it's not just procurement in tech, it's procurement in construction, procurement from school boards, and all these things. We could literally save billions of dollars in procurement alone and cut our taxes.
Thank you. Do you wish to follow up?
Yeah, just briefly. So, in seeking election as the representative for this district, how do you feel as a libertarian saying I want to be less in your lives? You know what I mean? You know what I'm driving at here?
Yeah, no, it's tough. It's actually even tough to get a libertarian to sign your nomination papers because we're a little bit anti-bureaucracy, and I think the misunderstanding of what a libertarian who wants to run for office is that we know that we can make a difference. People are like, oh, you want to delete the government and you want to have U.S.-style healthcare. Well, we don't want U.S.-style healthcare. Nobody wants that. But there are different ways to do things, and we need to start thinking outside of the box. And we got to start chipping away at some of the things that don't make sense. Government procurement is one of them. The property transfer tax I mentioned. I apologize to all the used car salesmen and car salesmen. I wasn't calling you out. That's a perfectly appropriate marketing tactic for your job. It's not appropriate for politicians. Why do we pay PST on private car sales? There's all these things that just don't make a whole lot of sense, and we just got to chip away at these things, and the more money we have in our pockets, the more that we can choose what to do with it instead of relying on the government to choose for us what nonprofits to fund.
Thank you. Joe Fries with a new question.
This one's to Mr. Shumaker. I usually get booed when I ask this question of the underdogs, but thankfully there's not a crowd here tonight. So, I hate to break this to you, but it's unlikely that you're going to win this race. But why should people vote for you anyway?
Well, first of all, I didn't know I was the underdog. This actually, my budget, I think, right, my war chest is actually, no, I'm not going to tell you. This is truly a David and Goliath fight. But I want to let the rest of the candidates know that I'm going to take it easy on you for the rest of the campaign. What was the question?
Why should people vote for you? I mean, your name's on the ballot, so people could vote for you. Who might want to?
Absolutely. My goal is to raise the profile of the Greens. As I said earlier, the diversity is what makes good decisions. And us Greens, we're your conscience. And so if all of a sudden, for instance, the NDP should win a majority, we're nothing. We're finished. And that's not good. That's not democracy. So.
I'm going to...
Joe, do you wish to follow up?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mr. MacIntyre, this is your third and final challenge
I'm going to
card.
burn my last challenge on this. And first, I thought I was the underdog. I thought libertarians were the underdog because we didn't get any of the $13 million in per vote subsidies. We would have denied them anyway. I always respect anybody that runs for office, and I've said this to everybody in the past. I've been advised to not say this, but I saw in your Castanet interview, and you said, or you were asked, why did you run for the Green Party? And you're like, well, the NDP didn't call me, and Dan's running for the Liberals, so it sounded to me like the Green Party was your third choice. And I understand why we vote for the Green Party. We all love the environment. We all want the environment to be better. Libertarians can actually do a lot more with that if we reduce the taxes and allow more innovation to happen. It feels good to vote for the Green Party. I understand that, but realistically, they are just another non-independent voice in the legislature. And wouldn't it be nice if we had somebody that could actually ask some questions in the legislature without the controls of their party?
Would you like to use a challenge card?
I thought I'd just get to respond. No, yeah, I've got three. Go for it.
Yeah, okay,
Go
so
for it, Ted.
the first challenge card, go ahead,
Okay.
60 seconds.
By the way, I should probably leave my sense of humor at home during interviews.
I thought it was a joke.
That was a joke. But it's not a joke. The NDP didn't call me. Sorry, where was I going with that? I forget. It doesn't matter. This has been so cool, just to be a part of democracy. Next.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ashton would like to challenge and offer 60 seconds on this topic.
Thank you. It's not a challenge, it's just a statement. Keith, I was the first elected official to come out and say I would not touch a penny of the money that is coming back from Elections BC to the people that have voted, i.e. and it works on the tabulation. I was the first. Todd Stone was the second one. Yes, it's going to parties. None of it's coming in my direction. The people that have supported me get a tax deduction when they write you a donation. That's all that I am prepared to accept is personal donations coming from those individuals. I want nothing to do with that money. I think it's wrong. And a follow-up is that Ted, you're absolutely right. I'll say this as much as I can. The legislature was working incredible in Victoria with the Greens, with the NDP, and with the Liberals all pulling in the same direction. And it's an absolute shame that this election was called at this point in time. It was totally not needed.
Thank you. And we will go to Chelsea Powrie with a question for Mr. Ashton.
Mr. Ashton, with respect, Andrew Wilkinson hasn't captured the public imagination in the sense that we haven't seen Wilkinson mania as a politician. He's been criticized also for the handling of the Thornwaite Maw affair. Why should people who don't like Mr. Wilkinson still vote for you, knowing that he's your leader calling the shots?
Andrew Wilkinson is the leader of the Liberal Party, but the votes that are cast in the riding, they say Penticton, that's the actual official name of the riding. I always say Penticton to Peachland on it. They're electing me. I'm the person that represents them in Victoria. And contrary again to what, I don't want to single Keith out, but we have free votes in our party, but we also have a rule that says a heads up, so no surprises. So all you do is you tell your peers in caucus the way you're going to vote so that everybody knows. And as far as Andrew Wilkinson, I've had nothing but the pleasurable opportunity of dealing with a man that is a medical doctor, a lawyer, and a Rhodes Scholar. Does he get the public media that the Premier's getting? No, he doesn't. The Thornwaite issue was wrong. It should have never happened. If the gallery and the audience looks and they can see the pictures on there, Dan Ashton was not on that. I do not believe in roasts. Roasts always turn into something that they shouldn't be. If you want to say thank you to somebody like Ralph Sultan, an incredible individual, I did it personally.
Thank you, Chelsea. Do you wish a follow-up?
Just a quick one, yeah. Can you point to a recent example when you voted against your party? Because as you mentioned, you have your vote. So can you point to a recent example when you...
I haven't voted against it in caucus. I can tell you that there's been some incredibly... heated is not the right word, but some very vigorous discussions about how we feel that we should vote, but I have not stood up and said it. However, there was a case in the legislature, it's on television, you can see it, where a document was being read about what was transpiring at the legislature with the turmoil in the staff and the issues around the speaker. I was the only individual, and I'll be frank, I was chastised for it by members of my party that I represent, by standing up and saying, this is the people's house. There's a power over this place right now. We have to address it collectively. We can't do it individually. We have to do this collectively and bring the trust back. So there is a time that I actually spoke out of turn and did not follow the rule of giving people a heads up. So that's voting against it. There's an occasion.
Thank you. It is 8:39, so we will have closing remarks later, but we will get as many questions in as we can, and we'll go back to my colleague Joe Fries with a fresh question.
Okay, this will be another panel question. I think it was last week on the campaign trail, the Liberals accused the NDP of quote-unquote warehousing marginalized people in social housing projects. There's great examples of that here in Penticton. This last week it has to do with the Victory Church proposal for an emergency shelter. This is all premised on the Housing First model. So I guess if there's a criticism that people are being warehoused, I guess first of all, do you agree with this Housing First strategy? If not, what's a better way to do it? And where are we going to start, James?
Okay, we will go back to Ms. Boot.
Thank you. Yes, I am aware of the Victory House housing initiative. But what I would like to say is that people that are homeless, they need a place to shelter. And before anything else can be done, before any work can be done on helping them with addictions or helping them with their mental health problems that they may have, we need to get those people into a nice, warm place. And I know that it is the responsibility or that this was a decision of Penticton City Council for the emergency shelter over the winter. That does lie with the City Council and the people that they represent. But I think it's very important that people have the opportunity to have a warm place to sleep. Thank you.
Mr. Shumaker.
Yes, I'm aware of the housing first philosophy. I agree with housing first. Our problems is we're back to dealing with what's important and urgent instead of spending the money on what's important and not urgent. I've been through that a couple of times. We actually have a choice. We either house them or warehouse them, or they sleep in our backyards or my truck. While they're being housed, we have less problems, I believe, with theft. Can we do more? Yes. I already mentioned about the residency criteria through BC Housing. I do get frustrated when I find out the guy's from Edmonton for 2 weeks and all of a sudden we're looking after him. That needs to be dealt with.
Thank you. Mr. Ashton.
You know, I'm incredibly proud of the opportunity that was given through myself and Rich Coleman, the Minister of Housing at the time, to create 177 units in Penticton. We learned very quickly it's just not the units. You just can't stick people into them. You have to provide the social issues and the mental health issues that go along with that housing. And it was unfortunate, and my credit goes to the Minister of Housing for the NDP with acquiring a piece of land that they thought they could put another house on. Unfortunately, it was for 50 people right in the middle of a school zone, and the community, including the city, rallied against it. That particular location was moved over to Winnipeg Street, but they didn't learn the lesson that we learned, is you have to start providing supports. And when this inclement weather, some of it which we've seen recently as of last night and today, is that we have to get people in, but we have to work together to try and see where we can get them in. But it's just not sticking somebody in and hope into a room that hopefully it makes it work. It doesn't. You need the additional supports on a continual basis.
Thank you. Mr. MacIntyre.
This is a subject I could talk about for an hour easily. So when I was working with the Smart Cities Challenge, I talked to CMHA, I talked to homeless people, I talked to all kinds of things. And realistically, what it is building housing gets you votes. And housing is not the be-all, the end-all. A homeless person isn't a homeless person isn't a homeless person. You have someone who is filling out the provincial checkbox, and they have to check off the box homeless, and they're like, I'm not homeless. I'm like, yeah, actually you lost your home, so you have to check that box off. And so there's a big misunderstanding of what we actually really need. We all need a good night's sleep. There is no question about that. But there's multiple ways that we can do it. We need to try different things. Like we could have communities for homeless people. I've had many of them say, you know, sometimes I just need an outlet and park in your driveway with my car. Sometimes I just need a locker to lock my stuff in because I'm sleeping on the street, but the criminal element is stealing my things.
Thank you. Fresh question, I'll go over to, from Castanet, Chelsea Powrie.
So as the economy slowly reopens, if the predicted second wave of COVID-19 does come in and cases were to start growing significantly, would you support a similar strategy to the shutdown we experienced this March to flatten the curve again? And if not, what's the alternative?
All right, and we'll answer in the reverse order of the previous question. So Mr. MacIntyre, you're up first.
Yeah, well, first of all, we're not entering a second wave, absolutely. What we're in is a media reporting kind of a frenzy about, we're 10,000 cases, record number of cases, and what's not being reported on is the number of tests that we're doing. So the narrative that's happening right now is young people are spreading the virus. Well, a virus doesn't magically start infecting young people all of a sudden. What happened was we weren't testing people that were lower symptomatic in the spring. So my statistical analysis, and again, I have background in pandemics and have worked directly with the CDC, built algorithms from scratch. What we are is getting ourselves in a little bit of a panic for something that isn't necessarily there. Absolutely, it can get there, but we're not there right now. If you look at hospitalizations, you look at deaths, you look at how it affects people across Canada. Dr. Henry, I wrote a letter to her yesterday, look it up online, CC'd a whole bunch of people on it. She even said our median age of death is 85. So.
Thank you. Mr. Ashton.
We can't go through what we've just gone through. The economy isn't going to survive. We've learned. When spring came around and the lockdowns took place, people weren't as adept to social distancing and creating their own bubbles around them as what we are now. So to go back to that, I know Ontario is partially back there and partially Quebec also. British Columbia is not going to survive, and that the pandemic funding that was okayed in March, it still hasn't arrived for a lot of people, including businesses, and businesses are also looking for help these days. So from the bottom of my heart, I hope it does not come down to another lockdown. I read today, and it was in the Vancouver Sun, that 30% of the people in British Columbia are having trouble paying their bills as a direct relation to what's happened during the pandemic. That's frightening. So we can't go back to that way.
Thank you. Mr. Shumaker.
Right. Do I support a shutdown? I feel the same as Dan. Man, I hope this doesn't happen. However, at the time, we have to do what we have to do. What I was a bit disappointed in the last, if we'll call it a shutdown, was that at the same time that Walmart was open and it was a zoo in there, at that same time the small business on Main Street couldn't open. I found the unfairness a bit disturbing. The racetrack, what can it hold? Easily 1,000 people with 10 feet social distancing, and we allowed 50 people, so the guy goes broke or is in serious trouble. Yes, all we can do then is go after the masks and the social distancing. And you're right, the cost to totally shut down is, I can't imagine that.
Thank you. Ms. Boot.
Thank you. I would suggest that it was in July, the Canada Day weekend, that saw the considerable spike in COVID in young people as a result of their activities on that weekend in Kelowna. I don't think we are, I don't know. I'm not an expert in health, but I really hope that we are not going into a second wave, and I think that much like British Columbians throughout the province have been really good at following the recommendations and guidelines of Dr. Bonnie Henry, I think that will continue. And if that does continue, then we will not see the outbreaks and the high numbers that they're seeing in Ontario and Quebec. It's the people of BC that have made the difference. And I myself have spoken to business owners, like the person that cuts my hair. She says she will not survive a second shutdown. So Bonnie Henry has always said we are going to do whatever we can not to have to increase those changes.
Thank you. Media panelists, we have time, I think, for one more question each, because we have to make closing remarks. Mr. Fries.
Thank you. If there's one good thing that's come out of the pandemic, it's probably that there's finally some awareness about the issues in long-term care homes in BC. Now, there's a lot of talk about staffing these things up, getting more people trained, et cetera, but If we look at a place like the Summerland Seniors Village, it had 2 administrators appointed in a 7-year span. This is a private facility. So it's clear that the private sector is not the answer to what ails long-term care homes. What do you think is?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Ashton.
Okay, first of all, I have to declare conflict. My mom is in that institution, and the people that work in there are incredible. However, we need equalization. We need those people that are working in private. So you have interior health, you have for-profit, you have not-for-profit. People work in not-for-profit and for-profit. They can literally walk to interior health and get approximately a $5 to $6 an hour raise plus benefits. There needs to be equalization. That's how we're going to keep people in these particular places. And the major thing for myself is seeing the decrease in mental health and mental abilities that, and I'm speaking from personal experience, that I've seen there. And we have to start addressing that. It's not about the money. These are our mothers, our fathers, our loved ones, and we have to start taking better care of them. And I think there are ways that Interior Health and Dr. Bonnie Henry, et cetera, and health authorities can make it better for the families so they can see their loved ones on a more regular basis.
Thank you. Mr. MacIntyre?
Yeah, I think we can debate whether public or private long-term care homes are a problem in the future. What we have to do is address the problem we have right now. I have heard from people where there's 7 out of 13 staff that are working double shifts, routinely 25% understaffed. And some of the rules that are happening now, and again, this is the same restrictions happening in Vancouver are happening here. I understand why the rules are in there where people can't work at multiple care homes, but we're a smaller city and things are a little bit different here. And so what's happening is we're burning out the staff, and again, it's this toxic relationship with the government and their employees, and we can't have people continue to burn themselves out like this. And the seniors themselves, they need human contact. And again, I've had so many people tell me the horrors it is of not being able to see their family and the health outcomes. People can survive an illness better when they're healthy. They're not able to do the things that they normally do. They're not able to see their family. They're not able to get a hug. Does this feel right?
Thank you. Mr. Shumaker?
Yes, I agree with Dan. Actually, our problem between the for-profit and non-for-profit has a lot to do with what we pay or what is paid to the not for the profit. 2/3 of those people are non-union. So like he said, you walk across the street and you get $5 an hour or more. Also making the point that as a Green Party, I still am not a doctrinaire. I had to look up the word. I don't follow a dogma or ideology without the common sense. If Liberals and Dan have a good idea with the housing, I'm all in. If the NDP has a good idea about no-fault auto insurance, which I love, I'm all behind you. Can I solve the crisis right now? Sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Boot?
After.
Yep. Go ahead, Ms. Boot, you're up.
Dan, were you using a challenge?
No,
Oh,
Yeah, it's your turn, though, and then he will have the challenge.
okay, thank you. Well, I'd like to say that for 16 years, the BC Liberals cut healthcare services and introduced the for-profit model for long-term care. This resulted in understaffing, which also resulted in people that were not being paid properly, and they were having to move from one facility to another, introducing COVID into more than one facility. The BC NDP has a plan to hire another 7,000 healthcare workers and a number of other things that are related to increasing the healthcare services in the province. And a critical part of hiring these healthcare workers is making sure that they are fairly compensated for the essential work that they do to protect our seniors.
Thank you. Mr. Ashton has challenged.
It's not a challenge, it's more of a statement.
Sure.
Toni, thank you for that, but how many seniors homes have you built or your party built in the last 3.5 years? I can tell you it's zero. Every one of those homes here in Penticton, every one of them were built under Liberals. And that's not the point I wanted to say. I just want to thank you, Toni. I want to thank you, Keith, and I want to thank you, Ted. I don't care who's in government. This is an issue that has to be addressed by ever who is sitting in Victoria. We have to start looking after these people better than what is happening right now. So please, who's ever successful or whatever party is, this should become a #1 priority. These are the people that we love, cherish, and these are the people that we should be looking after to the best of our ability, no matter what home they're in.
Thank you. We're going to go to Chelsea Powrie. In the interest of time, this is going to be a rapid fire question, so try for a 15-second answer, and we will go left to right, starting at Mr. Shumaker. Chelsea.
All right. If you were a U.S. citizen, who would you vote for in the upcoming presidential election?
Okay, Mr. Shumaker.
Let me think. Biden.
Thank you. Mr. MacIntyre.
I actually kind of reject the question on principle, because I think this is a big problem in our culture right now, is we're so focused on the Trump-Biden election that nobody's paying attention to the fact that we've passed a law like Bill 19 that has completely given government more power than any government should actually ever have, and we don't seem to care. I would vote for the Libertarian candidate. I'm not even sure his name. I don't pay attention to U.S. politics. It's a waste of time.
Thank you, Ms. Boot. Who would you vote for?
Well, I'll answer the question that you asked. I think it's pretty clear that perhaps there's not much choice there, but it would definitely be for Biden.
And Mr. Ashton.
I think it's a difficult question, Chelsea, and I'm going to say it. There's 350 million people in the United States counting their territories, Guam, Puerto Rico, etc. Those are the only two people they could come up with to rule the best, probably one of the best. I'll put Canada's #1. One of the best countries in the entire world. I'm sorry, I would one election I wouldn't vote in.
Okay, thank you. It's time for our closing remarks, and Mr. MacIntyre and Mr. Ashton used all their challenges. Ms. Boot, you used 2, and Mr. Shumaker, you used 1, so you are allowed to tack on the time if you should wish. And speaking in the reverse order is Ms. Boot, and you are allowed a maximum of 2 minutes, so we'll give you a warning bell at 1:45, please. So for her final words of the evening, welcome back to the podium one final time, the NDP candidate, Toni Boot.
Thank you, James. Well, this was fun. I love doing this kind of stuff. So I, again, would like to thank the organizers, and for everybody that's watching from their sofas at home, I hope you have a glass of wine, and it had darn well better be good Okanagan wine. We've got so much of it here. John Horgan and his team have worked hard to keep our loved ones safe and make life easier for BC families. But there's much more to do, and we need to keep BC moving forward in a plan that works for everyone. I'm happy with how our province has got us safely through the pandemic to date. I'm glad that John Horgan and his team are supporting and expanding the services we rely upon. BC has one of the strongest economies in the country and is one of the best places to live. Tonight, I hope you heard answers to the question you need to ask yourself before you go to the polls. Do I want to see John Horgan or Andrew Wilkinson lead me on the path to recovery? Pretty sure you can imagine what my answer is. I would like to see John Horgan. The BC NDP have done a great job, but there is, like I said, much more to do. As we plan for the recovery, we have the chance to elect a strong voice for the Penticton riding. We need a representative that is at the table in a key role in an NDP government, one that proposes and champions solutions for our unique region. On October 24th, let's take our place at the table. I'm asking for your vote to be part of John Horgan's team in Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boot. We'll now move in reverse order from the opening remarks to the BC Liberal candidate, Mr. Dan Ashton. You used 3 cards, so you have 60 seconds to wrap it up.
Thank you very much. I want to thank each and every one of you for being in here tonight and hosting this. Greatly appreciated. And to the viewing audience, thank you for watching this tonight. To each and every one of you, you're not voting for John Horgan, you're not voting for Andrew Wilkinson in the Penticton, Summerland, Peachland, and Naramata and the regional areas around it. You're voting for an individual, one of the four up here. I would ask that you consider me. I would ask you to consider the experience that I've had, the deliverables that I've done in Victoria, and how I am, and this word got tossed around tonight, how I'm cooperative, collaborative, and I'm going to throw in respectful. I have a tradition of treating people like how I wanted to be treated. And I do that in Victoria. And I take your ideas, whether you're from a party that I represent or a person that doesn't vote whatsoever, I take them to Victoria and I use my best ability to ensure I get you an answer, if not the solution. So when it comes around on October the 24th, please consider the experience and please take a look at a person that has kept his word. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ashton. For his final words, 60 seconds, is our Libertarian candidate for the final time tonight, Mr. Keith MacIntyre.
60 seconds or 2 minutes?
No, you get 60 seconds. You used your 3 challenge cards.
I see, got it. Yeah, there's so much more I'd like to say. I'm disappointed there wasn't any ALR questions because I think there's a massive problem with ALR issues being made in Victoria, hurting our farmers. I talked to someone from the BC Fruit Tree Association today, and it's just, it's terrible what's going on. And I'm going to say this again, we really need to look at the harm that we're doing to people. We have people that have lost their jobs at 12 years that are alcoholics. We have people that have gone into surgery and they come out and they are no longer functioning human beings from the isolation. We have seniors saying that they're in jail. We have them contemplating suicide. We have to remember we do want to save lives with the measures of our pandemic, but we need to stop being reactive and we need to get some strategy to this. We haven't really changed our approach since the spring. There are different ways to do this, and we need to look at it on a regional level, and we have to stop harming people. We are actually killing more people with our measures than we're actually saving.
Thank you, Mr. MacIntyre. And finally, we'll go to Mr. Shumaker. Now, you only used 1 challenge card tonight, so you are allowed a maximum of 3 minutes. You certainly don't have to use it, but for our final time, I'll introduce you one more time to our Green candidate, Mr. Ted Shumaker.
Thank you. Please don't make me use all 3 minutes. Okay. No, I am honored to be a part of a democratic process. I think how blessed we are to have these open and free chats, and we don't have to worry about somebody shooting us when we go outside. I'm inspired by the brave women of Belarus who actually put their lives at risk just to be heard. People, get out there and vote, please. My fellow candidates are not my enemies. They're honorable people. We all want to do the best for BC. We actually, after tonight, I realize we actually agree on probably more than we disagree on. I'd like to thank them for their contribution. Dan, Toni, Keith, thank you. I strongly disagree with the call of this election. It's not right, but we're in it now, so let the people speak. I hope that the voters do send a message to the NDP backroom boys that what they have done is a mistake. I'd like to thank our moderators, Chelsea, Joe, James, much appreciated, the timing ladies. Thanks to the Penticton Lakeside Resort and the sponsors. As Dr. Henry says, stay safe, be kind, and please sign up as a BC supporter, a BC Green supporter on our website. And you can make your own homemade sign saying, I support BC Greens for your windows. Thank you. It's been a slice.
Thank you, Mr. Shumaker. And before we sign off, I have a couple thank yous of my own. Chelsea Powrie and Joe Fries, thank you for your very thoughtful and outstanding questions. Appreciate that. Our timing team, Shannon and Penny from the Penticton Herald, my colleagues. I have the greatest job in the world. I love going to work every day, and they're out here on their own time helping out because they believe in democracy. So thank you. Our sponsors, the Penticton Lakeside Resort and also the South Okanagan Real Estate Board, couldn't do this without you. Thank you very much, as well as the staff at the Lakeside that have gone out of their way since about 3 o'clock today. Thank you to the other media outlets which have covered this event. Groove V Productions, we hired for the evening, Andrew Jacobite and his team. They do an excellent job. This was the first time for all of us, so we had a couple hiccups here and there, but they always do an outstanding job, and I had 100% confidence in them. The viewing public, thank you for watching. This will be on until October 24th on the Herald's Facebook page, as well as Castanet. So please tell your neighbors to watch it. They can watch it in installments, or if you tuned in late, please watch it again, because this is an important election. Advanced voting begins tomorrow, being Wednesday, and I would like to see everyone cast a ballot. Also on the Herald's Facebook page, you're welcome to comment on tonight's proceedings, but I do ask something that I always try to follow, although my critics might not necessarily agree with me. It is okay to attack the person's ideas, but please don't attack the person. There's a difference between doing that. And if you should so desire, we would love to have you write a letter to the editor, letters@pentictonherald.ca. What did you think of tonight's event? What could we do better? And what comments did you enjoy? I've saved my most important thank you till the end, and that is to our candidates. They all agreed to the format unanimously, and they came up and gave freely of their time, and we appreciate that greatly. And I think any one of these four individuals will be a remarkable MLA for our area. So one final time, I do thank Mr. Dan Ashton from the BC Liberals, Ms. Toni Boot from the BC NDP, Mr. Keith MacIntyre from the Libertarians, and Mr. Ted Shumaker from the BC Greens. Again, thank you to our audience for watching, and it's countdown, so please vote on October 24th. Good night.
It's too bad there's no applause.
And do not shake hands with each other, but wave at one another.